about a mile before we came in, I said to you I felt like we hit something.
Yeah.
And our speed slowed down.
Bloody hell.
That's another good night's sleep under the belt. What a great little spot this is. We were lucky we had the weather on our side though. There were no squalls. It's a bit of morning breeze, which I think is quite normal here, but I just thought I'd quickly show you. The moon is up there. The sun has not yet risen, but as I turn into the wind, just this beautiful view. Well, we started this morning off with some favourable winds and current. We were motor sailing at 6.5 knots, and then when we turned the engine off we were still sailing at 5. But as we came around the corner, unfortunately the tide started falling and the wind dropped away. So as you can see, we're now just motoring in flat calm waters. Now we are in the Bunakan National Park region. Bunakan is one of 4 islands, and I don't know how much you can see over my shoulder, probably not a lot. Yep, there we go, in between the sails there. This is a protected area, rightly so. We don't have time to visit these, unfortunately, and it's actually not possible to take the boat there. We do know of one boat, I think, took a mooring line, but I suspect these mooring lines are for visiting day tripper motorboats, so they're not really designed for sailboats. What you would normally do is base yourself at Manado, which is the next big town we're going to be going past shortly, or just up the coast at Kima, which is where we hope to anchor just for one night. And then you take a day tripper boat out there. It's supposed to be very good for diving. We won't have time for that this time, but you never know. When we get round the top and to base ourselves in Bitung, we might have more time to come back round and explore this area. A slow motor up now, current against us, and we're just crossing now this big bay that divides the mainland here, Bunakan Island, and the next tip of the mainland, which will be the north end of Manado, which is the big port town here. Not very good for anchoring, we understand. It's a big open bay with no protection whatsoever. It's funny, I was just thinking how the waters are so clear here, and that we hadn't seen rubbish in the waters for ages, but sadly here we are, going through a huge patch of plastic bags, wrappers, Hessian sacks, all sorts of shit. It's all collecting in one particular spot. So I'm at the front just keeping an eye on things, because sometimes these big plastic bags can float under the water and catch around the props. So we've got Liz on the helm and I'm just spotting for her. It's getting worse. There's even more shit coming up now. Okay, so what you saw there was a failed attempt to get into Kima. Kima is above Manado, and well, it came recommended by a couple of people actually. It's 30 metres right up until a whole load of fishing platforms. So the only anchorable place would have been in between the fishing platforms. There were a couple of floats that were obviously mooring buoys that were vacant, that quite possibly could have had a fishing boat coming to tie up to it later on tonight. Anyway, it just looked a mess. I mean, the place was so messy. Did you see the size of that bloody boat they've got on dry land? I mean, just, yeah, interesting place, but not my idea of a nice anchorage. And it's open to the north, which is what we've got at the moment. Funnily enough, we've got northerly winds, a little bit of swell you can see. So anyway, we've decided to go up the coast, and right on the tip, the very tip, the northeast corner, on the northwest bit of the northeast corner, is an anchorage in among some reefs called Kima. So, sorry, no, Kima? No, what's it called? Hold on. Kora. That was Kima. We're going to try Kora. Kima Kora. Spicy. Liz just said that looks like something out of Torremolinos. And when we talk about the positives of development, that's not what we had in mind. Anyway, we're going to be tucking in down behind here. There's a channel through the reef. In fact, you can see the reef that fringes all the way around here. And so we're in, 60 metres, and that comes up to 0. We're going to go round there and behind that building and down into the mangroves. With any luck.
Well, we've gone from the ridiculous to the sublime. Kima Badjo, I was practically shaking hands with the fishermen on the beach, and we were still in 39 metres. And we've now come up the coast to Kora Kora, and it's beautiful, surrounded by an enormous amount of mangroves and really pretty turquoise reefs that are not too close together, so there's enough room for us to come through. It's in the Indonesian cruising guide, which we haven't used for a bit, and it was good to find this place there because we were a little bit out of ideas. So we've come in here, and it's supposed to gradually get shallower as the further in we go. I think once we reach 20 metres or so, we'll consider putting the anchor down. But it's been a long day, and this is lovely. I'm hoping it's going to be our next anchorage.
We'd noticed as we were entering the lagoon that something odd happened to our speed, and sure enough, as we were preparing to anchor, we put Esper in astern, and the engine stopped dead. At this point, we were in 20 metres, so we dumped the chain, and Jamie dived down to take a look.
Get a knife out, the sailor's knife. Usual place in the box.
Wow.
So, about a mile before we came in, I said to you I felt like we hit something.
Yeah.
And our speed slowed down. That got wrapped around the prop. It's done something. The reason why the engine stopped, I think, is because of that f***ing net that got wrapped around the prop. This happened to us once before in the Gulf of Aden when we got a Hessian sack wrapped around the prop, and it's enough to kill an engine dead. It literally just bang, the engine completely cuts out. When that cut out, I told Liz to drop the hook, and she did. And I was able to start the engine again, and I was able to put it into a stern, and no alarms went off and everything was fine. So obviously putting it into a stern helped kind of unravel it. But anyway, so I think that's the situation. I hope that after the engine cools down and we go back to it tomorrow morning, everything will be hunky-dory. But Liz and I had already decided we're going to spend a day here. We've got a bit of video editing to catch up on, but to be honest, I'm so fucking fed up with motoring. I just want a day off.
And it's lovely here.
And it's lovely here. Sorry, I should be positive, shouldn't I? I'm just very, very tired, and I'm very, very pissed off with motoring. But that should not detract from this beautiful Anchorage, which is so gorgeous. There's another boat at anchor. Morning. This is the last leg to Bitung. So we're going over the top of the tip of Sulawesi. Just spent 2 days at that anchorage. I can't tell you how nice it is to know that you're anchored in mud in a respectable depth, 12 metres, and perfectly protected except from any northeasterlies, which we're not in the season for. So it's a good spot, that, really nice. Around the top here there's lots of shallow patches. There is an island that we had planned to anchor at, which we won't do this time, but since we're going to be spending a bit of time in this area, we'll probably come back up to this place. There's a dive school there. Again, it's another protected anchorage, so that's only 15 miles up the coast from Bitung. So yeah, let's get this out of the way, have a coffee, probably just motoring because there hasn't been much wind lately, and yeah, Bob's your uncle, anchor down in Bitung and do some more repairs and boat maintenance, I think, is top of the list.
It's been a few hours of gentle motor sailing from our lovely anchorage of Kora Kora. Had a few very quiet, lovely, relaxing days there, but now we're entering the Lembeh Strait and we're heading to Bitung, which is a big port in northeastern Sulawesi. And it's where we will have to renew our visas. I'm looking forward to going to a market, getting some fresh food, a number of things we need to do while we're there. Not exactly sure where we're going to park up the boat yet. There are various possibilities. So this is the Lembeh Strait. This is what I've been looking at for over a year because it's got to have some of the best diving in the world for critters, for the really small stuff. So we're hoping, not sure when, but at some stage to get under the water and just see what the Lembeh Strait's all about.
Just coming around the northeast corner, we've had to contend with a lot of crap in the water. Obviously the effect of big masses of water congregating around the tips here with current. There's so much shit. It's mainly wood, but we've had to avoid it, and I'm giving this corner a very wide berth. We've got a little bit of swell coming in from the Pacific, I suppose, and I'm eyeing up the waves crashing against the shore there, so that's reminded me to stay well out. I remember the last time we saw this much rubbish in Indonesia, and it was as we were heading towards Jakarta down the Java Sea, and I actually remember saying to camera, Indonesia, if you're listening, sort it out because it's disgusting. Obviously a lot of that flotsam was natural, it was wood, and of course for every 10 bits of wood floating on the surface you can guarantee there's probably a plastic sack or net hanging underneath, just under the surface, so I tend to put the boat in neutral and glide over the top of it. And you know, we're not saying that all this rubbish is local either. As I explained, we've got all these currents and headlands and big masses of water all congregating in a small area, and a lot of this could have been carried for miles and miles, but I wouldn't like to do that journey at night time because there was a lot of dodging and ducking and manoeuvring. Yeah, so there we go, that is the northeast corner of Sulawesi. We're now heading down towards the Lembeh Strait. And I understand there's quite a lot of currents there, and we also have overhead cables that we have to go under. It's supposed to have an air draft of 45 metres, but apparently it's sagged, so we are to stick to the starboard side as we go underneath. And then we have a couple of choices of anchorages. One is much closer to town, but is subject to lots of current whipping through. So I think the other guys have opted for an anchorage which is further out, but much more protected. So we're just going to get down there, have a look, see what's what like, and make a decision when we're down there.
In February 22, after 2 years of lockdown in Kota Kinabalu, we left the shores of Sabah to embark on a 1,232 nautical mile journey. We followed the 2020 passage along the east coast, accompanied by ESCOM, the Malaysian Naval Security Force. We made an emergency stop at Sandakan, where we had to replace a deck fitting before rounding the Eastern Cape through overfalls. Our journey took us through the beautiful National Marine Park around Semporna and then towards the border between Borneo and Indonesian Kalimantan. Once we'd departed Malaysia, there was no turning back, and yet there were entry issues before finally quarantining in Nunukan. The port island of Tarakan was a real joy, but the journey south was hard work against all the prevailing currents. It was made up for by the stunning Derawan archipelago, including unspoilt Maratua. We made the 150-mile crossing over the top of the Makassar Strait with favourable currents and even some wind, a rarity in these equatorial waters. We'd make landfall in Toli Toli, where we found friends for life with the locals and started to fall in love with the beautiful island that is Sulawesi. Our journey across the top was plagued with daily squalls hitting 50 knots. Yet despite an engine issue in Gorontalo, it was some of the most stunning coastline we'd ever set eyes on. And we realised that even after anchoring in the Lembe Strait after 2,282 kilometres, our adventure around Sulawesi and beyond had only just begun.